to the computer. So today what I'd like to talk about is the last issue I have there in the sources I gave you. Last week we talked about stories from the Talmud, and we also talked about the Midrash, which are rabbinic exegesis of the text, but basically not legal discussions, but just the discussions of the text. And I explained that the Midrash is more interested in the idea that they're looking for in the text than to understand the simple meaning of the text. They're always looking for an idea. They're always looking for something to learn from the story. In the 13th century, in the Kabbalistic literature, we have a book called the Zohar. The Zohar, even though it's written in Aramaic and not in Hebrew, is written very much like a Midrash in its style. It's a later version, but the style is a little bit like a Midrash. The difference is it's more of a mystical text than a text just discussing the meaning of what's going on in the Bible. So I want to give one or two examples here of the Zohar and show what type of a text it is, and that's what I want to do today. Before that, though, I want to read to you something from... So the Zohar is considered one of the important books of the Kabbalah, and which there's a lot to be said about that. I'll just say a few words in the abridged form, let's call it that way. From antiquity, there has always been a Jewish esoteric knowledge, or let's call it some secret doctrine. And the question is, which actually makes sense, because if we had prophets who had revelation from God, that means that they had certain understandings of things. We also know in the Bible that you had groups, like in the book of Samuel, who called the sons of prophets, B'nai HaNevi'im, the sons of prophets. So what does it mean to be a son of a prophet? So a son of a prophet, it seems, is not somebody whose parents were prophets. It's somebody who studies to be a prophet. They look for somebody to teach them how to be a prophet because they want to reach that level too. So obviously in the time of prophecy, which according to our tradition is up into the prophet Malachi, who is still around at the beginning of the Second Temple period, around 500 years before the Common Era. So the prophets must have had some understanding of the world. So in our text, there is mention of secret doctrines, or what we call in Hebrew, Torat HaSod, doctrines of compilations of knowledge which were not known to most people. And then, of course, the question is whether these compilations of knowledge disappeared, or whether the Kabbalah, which emerges in the 12th century, is a direct continuation of these early forms of Jewish esoteric knowledge. I don't want to answer that question today. It's an important question, but it's not relevant for this particular discussion. But I want to read to you a text for the 13th century of Moses de Leon. You might be familiar with that name, Moses de Leon, because he is the same fellow who basically publicizes the Zohar in around 1280 in Castilla in Spain. So he has a book called Shekel HaKodesh, which is one of the books that he wrote, discussing the Kabbalah, which emerges in Provence and Spain in the late 11th and early 12th century. Really, let's say, in the 12th century. And he has a piece there where he discusses when the Kabbalah originated. So he says, the order of reality is revealed through this awe-inspiring wisdom, which is the basis of all wisdoms and is referred to as Kabbalah. and it is a tradition from Moses Sinai. So right away, Moses de Leon argues that the Kabbalah, which is known in his day in Spain, in Provence, this is the same Jewish secret knowledge that goes all the way back to the times of the prophets. He claims that Moses received it from Sinai. It is the tradition that from Moses at Sinai, who passed it on to Joshua, and Joshua to the elders, and the elders to the prophets, and the prophets of the men of the great assembly. We mentioned that forum of people who were in the Second Temple period, the men of the great assembly, when we talked about some of the books of the Bible that were edited by them. As the tradition of the Torah, and they passed this wisdom down. But Moses de Leon is arguing is that the knowledge of the Kabbalah, which emerges in Europe in the 12th century, did not begin in the 12th century, but it's basically a continuation of a long line of transmission of secret knowledge, which was never written down. That's his argument. Just like the oral tradition originally was never written down, but it was finally written down around the year 200, he claims that the Kabbalah, which for him represents also the secret knowledge going all the way back, was never written down. And that's why people are less familiar with it. But he says it was revealed from Moses at Sinai, just like the Bible was, the Torah, and the oral tradition. And this was also passed to Joshua and the elders to the prophets, and the prophets to the men of the great assembly, just like the oral tradition was passed down orally, the oral tradition of Jewish law. The same thing, the doctrine of the Kabbalah was passed down from generation to generation, from teacher to student, and then again from that student to the next student. That is his argument. Now, I want to show you something. He's going to slightly contradict himself, but the contradiction is very interesting. Okay, the first thing he says is that the origin of the Kabbalah is from Moses at Sinai, which means it has the same legitimacy as the giving of the Torah, the written Torah, the oral tradition of the Torah. The written Torah, of course, was written already in the 40 years that they were in the desert. The oral transmission went from generation to generation until the destruction of the Second Temple, and then Judah Hanasi, the head of the Sanhedrin, in the year 200 wrote it down. Says the Kabbalah was never written down, the secret doctrine, but now in our generation, little by little, things are being written down, like the Zohar. Let me continue. But he says that it starts with Moses. However, the truth is, this wisdom was given to Adam. And he entered the Garden of Eden and received this secret knowledge. And it was with him until he was sent away from Eden. When Adam died, it was inherited by his son Seth, about whom the verse says that he was born in the image of Adam. And then after Seth, Seth, shaped. And then after Seth, it was revealed to Noah, so that's many generations later, saintly one who passed it on to his son, Shem, who passed it down to Abraham, our father. And through this wisdom, Abraham served God and kept his laws and commandments. And he passed it to Isaac, and Isaac to Jacob, and Jacob to his sons, until the later generations stood at Sinai, and then it was given to Moses as well, who passed it from person to person for generations. Now, what does this mean? What is the difference? He seems to be saying two different things. First, he says it was given by Moses at Sinai, the secret doctrine, together with the written Bible and the oral transmissions that we received since the time of Moses. But this one was never written down at any time until very recently. Then he says, well, actually, it started with Adam. And from Adam, it went to his son Seth. And from Seth to Noah, and from Noah to Shem, etc. Oh, I see Mariana just joined. What is the difference between saying that the secret doctrine, which he calls Kabbalah, started from Moses at Sinai, or by saying that the secret doctrine started from Adam and Noah. Is there a difference between that argument? Is there a difference between saying that the Kabbalah originated from Adam or originated from Moses?
Well, of course,
What is the difference?
it's a
What is the
chronological one.
I'm sorry?
It's a chronological one.
I understand, but what is the implication? What is the
Oh,
difference between saying it started with Adam or it started with Moses?
It's a contradiction because as when you say it started with Adam, that means with the beginning of earth on a human being after the 6th day of
Right.
when
Or whenever, at some time during Adam's life. I mean, he did live a very long time, over 900
but
years.
that means
Yes.
as long as human being survived and lived on the earth, that means the beginning of Kabbalah.
Okay. And if you say the Kabbalah started with Moses, what does that mean?
That means there are a period of
Much later.
2050 or 2050, as I know.
Okay, I'm going to tell you the way I understand it. You see, the Torah and the oral tradition was given by Moses to the people of Israel. So if you're going to say that the Kabbalah or the Jewish secret doctrine was given also by Moses, that means the Kabbalah was given to the Jewish people only. Doesn't mean
Yes.
other people can't read the books, but it was given to the Jewish people. But if you're going to say that the secret doctrine, which today we call Kabbalah, was given to Adam and given to Noah, that means that it was given to the whole world.
Everybody.
Exactly.
Everybody.
It means something different.
Yes, yes.
Now, in my opinion, you could even argue they're both correct, because let's just look for a moment. When we think of civilizations around the world, there's a lot of esoteric knowledge out there. And when you make comparisons, let's say between, Jewish Kabbalah on the one hand, and let's say Buddhist secret knowledge or Hindu secret knowledge, or Chinese mysticism, or later on Islamic Sufism, or Christian mysticism. There are a lot of things in common. And even the ones that go back a long way, like Buddhism, let's say, and the works of the Vedas, which go back to a few hundred years before the Common Era, there seems to be a lot in common between all the mystical. There are differences, but there are also lots of things in common. Some of the practices, let's say, of Abraham Abulafi of the 13th century, or even the practices mentioned in the Hechalot literature, we can find sometimes in the Far East. So if Moses de Leon is correct that Adam receives a secret knowledge, that would make a lot of sense, and it would explain why we find literature around the world, which is literature which is interested in, let's say, the supernatural world or the world above us, and trying to understand what it is. And there seems to be a lot of similarities of techniques to try to get to these understandings, even the comprehension of what it must be. So that would make sense if Adam, Noah, had some understanding of these things, and then of course it would spread to the whole world. That wouldn't actually negate the idea that each nation understands it in its own understanding. That also makes sense. Different cultures, different people understand things differently. So even if you say that, and you still said Moses gave it to Israel at Sinai, the Jews would understand it in their own understanding of what it means. I'm just saying that that this argument opens up an interesting discussion, because esoteric knowledge exists in antiquity among many nations. And and sometimes to make the parallels between them is very interesting. The Kabbalah happens to be a very organized form of knowledge, which it's harder to find in that sense. It's very organized. The people who were writing it in the 12th, 13th, and 14th century were very organized writers. And it was important to them to come up with models that made sense, etc. I just wanted to point that out. Let's just read towards the end here.
May I have a question, sir?
Yes, of course, of course.
Moses de Leon
Yes.
is the same with Rav Luria.
No, Isaac Luria lives in the 16th century in Safat, in Safed. No, this is 13th century Castilian. He dies somewhere around 13, etc. No, he puts out the Zohar around 1280, and I think he dies in 1291, if I remember correctly. Okay, so
Thank you.
no problem.
Thank you.
So let's keep reading. And it was given to Moses, as I said above, and from there was passed from person to person, from generation to generation. However, in the exile, after we left the land of Israel, with all the suffering, its wisdom was forgotten except by unique individuals who pursued this wisdom in every generation. Therefore, it is a tradition from one person to another. Now, all the Torah, whether the written or the verbal Torah, is based on this wisdom, which means this is a different interpretation of both the written and the verbal Torah, not a different interpretation from a legal point of view, but from a conceptual point of view, from an idea point of view. Okay, that's introduction of Moses de Leon, where he tries to understand where the Kabbalah originated. That is his argument. Okay, I'm going to take two small pieces here and discuss them. This is taken from the Zohar, Genesis 149a. By the way, last semester, I have to say, when I taught in Bucharest, I got a present from one of the students. He gave me a Zohar in English. No, it's actually in Hebrew, in Aramaic. One of the students in the class, I forget his name. Yeah. So, okay, so this is, I'm not going to start with this one. I'm going to start with the second one. No, is it? Here it is. Okay. This is Zohar Genesis 209b. Very often the book of Zohar, which of course is a commentary on the 5 books of Moses, on the Pentateuch. But again, it's not exactly a commentary like the Midrash. It's a discussion of an idea that relates to whatever verses they are talking about. So this is a discussion of when Joseph, who was the viceroy of Egypt and the right-hand man of Pharaoh in the book of Genesis, after his brothers sold him to Egypt in slavery, and he had worked for Potiphar, and then he was put into prison, and then he got out of prison and he told Pharaoh the meaning of his dream, and then Pharaoh made him the second in command in Egypt. So it says that his brothers came to Egypt in order to get food because there was a famine all over that area in the Middle East. So they come to Egypt and Joseph sees them, but they don't recognize Joseph because he is much older, at least 17 years older. And also he looks different. He's all dressed up like an Egyptian. They wear cosmetics, they wear hats, they wear things. They did not recognize him, but Joseph recognized his brothers. And if you remember the story, he wants them to bring Benjamin. So he tells them, you cannot come back without your younger brother. So eventually they do, a few years later, after they convince their father to allow Benjamin to come. And then Joseph reveals himself to his brothers, and he says, I am Joseph, who you sold me into slavery down to Egypt. And the brothers, of course, are in shock. But Joseph says, don't worry, because this was not your doing. God did this in order that we should have a future here in Egypt. So after that, it says that the word got out and was heard in Pharaoh's house that the brothers of Joseph had come to see him. And the Hebrew, it says, V'hakol nishma. Kol in Hebrew means a voice. And it says the voice, meaning the word got out, we would say in English. How would you say that in Romanian?
Sorry?
How would you say in Romanian? Everybody heard that Joseph's brothers came to see him.
Toată lumea a auzit că frații lui
Iosif a venit să-l
au
vadă.
venit să-l vadă.
Right.
Da,
So
da.
in English, we would say the word got out. The word got out. In Hebrew, we say, the Bible says, Hakol nishma, which means the sound was heard or the voice was heard. Meaning people heard in the palace that Joseph's brothers came to visit him because they didn't know anything about Joseph. He came as an individual, as a slave. Nobody knew anything about him. So the voice was heard in Pharaoh's house that Joseph's brothers came, and it says that Pharaoh and his advisors were happy. He's a normal person in the end. He actually has a family. Now, the Zohar is interested in the word kol in Hebrew. Because the word kol in Hebrew, if you write it in Hebrew, it's bikuf, like this, kol, kuf vav lamed, which means voice, as opposed to the word kol, which means all. Right? If you write it with a kaf, it means all of. Kol ha'olam, the whole world. And kol with a kuf means voice. Also in Aramaic, kala, it means voice. Now, in the Bible, very often words are written without the vowels. And because they're without the vowels, they're also without letters that connect to the vowels. Vav is a letter that connects to a vowel. The middle letter here, vav. It has a dot on the top, it's O. But even if there's a dot on the top, without the vav, it still can be pronounced kol. It would still be kol. Excuse me. You read Hebrew? Hebrew letters?
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
Okay.
we just
So
started.
even if I write kuf lamed, I have to guess according to the context whether it's kal, which means easy, or if it's kol, which means a voice. The Bible usually does not, what we use, it doesn't have ktiv malay. It doesn't have full use of the silent letters. In modern Hebrew, there's a lot of use of silent letters because we don't use the dots when we write. So by adding letters, it helps you know if it's kol or kal. Adding the vav, you know for sure it's kol and not kal. But the Bible doesn't do that. Sometimes it writes kol with a vav, sometimes without. So the Zohar wants to understand how come sometimes it's with a vav and sometimes it's without. For example, in the story when Isaac says to his son Esau, I want you to bring me some game, meaning some animal that you will hunt and you'll bring to me and you'll give me and you'll feed me, and then I will bless you before I die.
Mm.
And then Rebecca goes over to Jacob and says, no, your father's giving the blessing to the wrong one. You've got to go. And you have to take his blessing. And she gives him the furry, this fur to put on his hands because Esau was a very hairy man and Jacob was not. He was smooth skinned. So she gave him these furs that Esau would wear. And she prepared a lamb for the father, and Jacob brings it in. And when Jacob comes in with the lamb, so Isaac, who that couldn't see very well, he said, Hakol kol Yaakov, the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau, because they feel very hairy. And then he blessed him, if you remember the story in Genesis.
Yes.
In the Hebrew it says, Hakol kol Yaakov, where the first one is with Kuf Lamed, the second one is Kuf Vav Lamed. So the first time it's without the Vav, second time it's with the Vav. spelled like this, Hakol, Kol, Hakov. So again, the Zohar wants to understand why sometimes with the Vav, why sometimes without, or is it just arbitrary? Now, the Zohar, as a mystical text, doesn't believe in arbitrary in the Bible. If something is written a certain way, it must be for a reason. Okay, that's the introduction. Now let's look at the piece. And the voice, which is written kol without a Vav, was heard in Pharaoh's house. Rabbi Abba is 2nd century Tanaig scholar. And by the way, he is a student, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who, according to the narrative of the Zohar, is the author of the Zohar. But actually, according to the narrative of Zohar, Rabbi Abba writes the Zohar. So Rabbi Abba opened the discussion and said, it says in the Psalms and the Tehillim of David, my soul yearns for the courtyard of God's temple. My heart and my flesh shall call out to the living God. So first they bring a verse, which, by the way, in the Midrashic style, this is very common, to bring a verse before the discussion. And this verse is supposedly relate to the discussion. Come and see. When a person prays, or prayers before their master, meaning God, they must first recite blessings every day and pray before their master at the proper time. In the morning, unite the right side. In the afternoon, unite the left side. Already you can see that this is like a mystical text. I'll try to explain. In the morning to unite the right side, and in the afternoon to unite the left side. The prayer and requests are needed daily for a man to unite with them. So, what does this mean? First of all, what does come and see? If you're familiar with the Talmud, which you're only a little bit familiar, the Talmud, whenever it starts a discussion, it always says, come and hear.
Yeah.
And the Zohar always says, come and see.
Mm.
Hear, H-E-A-R, to listen, to hear, yes,
I'm here.
relates to logic. You listen to something and you try to understand it. Like in the Bible, hear, O Israel, the Lord is God, the Lord is one, also means understand. O Israel, that the Lord is God and the Lord is one. So when the Talmud says, come and hear, meaning I'm going to tell you something rational, I want you to understand it. Come and listen. In Yiddish, very often, when they say, instead of saying, I understand you, they will say, I hear you.
Mhm.
It's just a way of talking. Yeah. The Zohar always says, come and see, because the Zohar is not interested so much in intellectual knowledge, but in
Proof.
revelation knowledge, which is like a vision.
Mhm.
Remember, all the prophets are visionaries. It's called Chazon Yeshayahu, the vision of Isaiah. So the prophecy is related like a vision. The Zohar, as a mystical text, is more interested in the word to see than the word to hear, because they're more interested in the prophetic vision than they are in the intellect. That's why they always use the term come and see. Even though in Hebrew, to see something and to hear something also means to grasp and to understand. By the way, in the English language too, I can say, I see what you're saying,
Yeah.
but I can also say, I hear what you're saying. Both mean the same. But in the Zohar, when they say come and see, it's because they're trying to look for more, almost like the prophetic vision, the intuition. They're using the word to see like an intuition. Now, what's going on here? When a person prays their prayers before their master, in the Jewish tradition, there are 3 prayers that we say during the day: the morning prayer, the afternoon prayer, and the evening prayer. We talked about this last week. The morning prayer, afternoon prayer, and the evening prayer. Now, Okay. The Talmud says in Brachot, when we talked about prayer last week, we read also from the Tractate of Brachot. It says that the three prayers represent the three patriarchs. The morning prayer is called the prayer of Abraham. And they say the proof is because it says before the Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, it says, when God told Abraham to bring Isaac as an offering, what's called the binding of Isaac, it says that Abraham got up early in the morning. It also says the same thing when he prayed to save the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. It says that he got up in the morning and he spoke to God. So the Talmud says, you see, Abraham is a morning person and he speaks to God in the morning. That's called the morning prayer. The Talmud says the afternoon prayer represents Isaac. Because when Abraham's servant goes to look for a wife for Isaac, which was Rebekah, so Rebekah comes, she goes on the camel, and she sees Isaac from a distance. And it says, and Isaac was walking in the afternoon between the bushes in the field. And he sees camels coming, and Rebekah sees him. And the Talmud says, what was he doing in the field in the afternoon? He was praying. So Isaac is called the afternoon. And then the Talmud says Jacob is called the evening prayer. Why? Because if you remember the story, when Jacob leaves his parents' house and goes towards Laban, who is in Aram in Syria, on the way it says that he slept and he had a dream and there was a ladder that he could see from standing on the earth and going up to the heavens, and the angels of God went up and down on this ladder. And then he prayed when he woke up. So Jacob represents the prayers at night. So Abraham is called the prayer in the morning. Isaac is called the prayer in the afternoon. And Jacob is called the prayer at night. What does that mean? In the morning, the sun is shining. It's starting to get warmer. You can see where you're going. It's a time of optimism. It's a new day. You can conquer the world. You can do different things. So there's a certain optimism in the morning when the sun is shining. The night is the opposite. I can't see. I might fall into a pit if I don't see where I'm going. I could tumble. The criminals like hanging around at night because nobody can see them. They can hide. So the night is a more dangerous time. So if Abraham represents the morning is the time of what's called kindness. As it says in Psalms 91, to state your kindness in the morning and your faith in the evening. Lagid baboker chastecha ve'emunatcha balelot in Psalm 91. It's called the Psalm of the Sabbath day. So in the morning is the time of God's kindness because everything looks good. Everything is optimistic. Abraham is a person who always seems to be successful. He fights the four kings and he wins. He saves Lot from the fate of being kidnapped from the four kings. And everything he does, he seems to be successful. He becomes rich and people want to get to know him. And he saves his wives from Pharaoh and from Avimelech, Sarah, and everything seems to be going well for Abraham. So he's called the morning, when life is optimistic. Jacob, everything seems to be going wrong in his life. His brother wants to kill him because he took his blessing, so he runs away. Actually, Rebekah sent him off. He goes to find a wife. He falls in love with Rachel, but he is cheated by his father-in-law and he's given Leah. So he works another 7 years for Leah. And then he works another 7 years in order to get money because Laban doesn't pay him correctly. And the angel of God explains to him that he should tell Laban to take the spotted sheep, because those are the ones that will be more plentiful. And then he tries to leave, and Laban catches up with him, and he wants to stop him, but God appears to Laban in a dream and says, don't say anything evil to Jacob. And then Jacob thinks, okay, life is getting better. But then his son Joseph is sold into slavery, and the brothers say that he was killed by a wild animal. So he's having a hard time in his life. So he represents the evening when things are difficult in life. When you pray in difficult times, it's not the same type of prayer when you pray in good times. Sometimes it's harder to pray in good times than it is in the difficult times. Because in difficult times, we're in need. In the good times, we feel okay. So, but it's just a different type of prayer. What is the afternoon? The afternoon is called Isaac. In the Bible, there's a story in Kings 2, or I think it's the end of Kings 1, of Elijah the prophet. Elijah the prophet is a prophet for the northern kingdom, which was the sort of semi-pagan kingdom. They had these calves that they set up, golden calves in Beit El and in Dan. And during the time of the reign of Achav and Jezebel, so Eliyahu keeps saying to the people, decide who you believe in. Do you believe in the one God, or do you believe in your golden calves? And Elijah finally says, let's have a showdown. You know what a showdown is in English? It's like when showdown, like when you have two people, they have a gunfight. So that's like a showdown. You know, in the West, people would have gunfights and see who. So he says, let's have a showdown. Let's have a competition.
Un
You
duel.
take what?
Un duel.
Okay.
In Romanian, in
Duel
Romanian.
Romanian.
Yes. So Elijah says, you take all your 400 prophets of the Baal was a Canaanite form of worship. Take all your 400 prophets, Achav. You have 400 prophets, your 400 prophets will be the first ones to go. They will call out to the Baal, which is their God. And they will say, oh, Baal, answer us. And if Baal answers them, then they won. If not, then I will take over and I will rebuild the altar of God, and I will ask God to call out. And if God calls out to us, then I won. That's what he says. So the people heard that, and they all agreed, good idea. Let's have this, what do you call it again?
Duel.
Gwen.
Duel. Sau
Yeah.
duel, așa îi spune.
Okay, so they're on Mount Carmel, which today is in the city of Haifa. And the 400 prophets of the Baal, you can probably see it, by the way. I'll tell you exactly what chapter. You want to see it? "450 prophets of the Baal," and it is, one moment. Doesn't say where. Kings 1, chapter 18, verse 26. Does anybody have it in Romanian? It's Kings 1, chapter 18, verse 26.
Just a second.
I'll look for it in a moment. Make sure I have the right place. Kings 1.
Chapter 7?
Chapter 18. Is that what I said?
Yes.
One moment. I have to make sure.
1:18.
One moment. There it is, yes. 18, verse 19.
Strânge
Ok,
acum
I
pe
got it.
tot... Asta ai găsit și tu? Strânge acum pe tot
Exact,
Israelul
da.
la mine?
It's we said chapter 18 of of Kings 1, Kings
Yeah.
book 1, 18, verse 19,
Yes,
right? To get all of Israel and Mount Carmel.
yes,
Okay.
yes, ok.
Okay, s'il vous plaît. You want to read it?
Citește tu,
Ok,
Gabriel.
zic eu.
Mhm.
Strânge acum pe tot Israelul la mine, pe muntele Carmel, pe cei 450 de proroci al lui Baal și pe cei 400 de proroci ai Astartei, care mănâncă la masa Izabelei. I go further?
Yeah, keep going. Just read the story. It's not a long story.
Ahab a trimis soli la toți copiii lui Israel și a strâns pe proroci la muntele Carmel. Atunci Ilie s-a apropiat de tot poporul și a zis: până când vreți să șchiopătați pe amândouă picioarele, dacă Domnul este Dumnezeu, mergeți după el, iar dacă este Baal, mergeți după Baal. Poporul nu i-a răspuns nimic. Și Ilie a zis poporului: eu singur am rămas din prorocii Domnului, pe când prorocii ai lui Baal sunt 450.
So there are 450 prophets of the Baal, and I'm the only prophet of the one God. So let's have a competition. Okay.
Să ni se dea 2 junci. Ei să-și aleagă un junc pe care să-l taie în bucăți și să-l pună pe lemne fără să pună foc. Și eu voi pregăti celălalt junc și îl voi pune pe lemne fără să pun foc. Apoi, voi să chemați numele Dumnezeului vostru și eu voi chema numele Domnului. Dumnezeul care va răspunde prin foc, acela să fie adevăratul Dumnezeu. Și tot poporul a răspuns și a zis: bine.
Okay.
Ilie
Now
a zis
25.
prorocilor, we're at 25, yes. Ilie a zis prorocilor lui Baal: alegeți-vă un junc din cei 2, pregătiți-l întâi voi, căci sunteți mai mulți, și chemați numele Dumnezeului vostru, dar să nu puneți foc. Ei au luat juncul pe care li l-au dat și l-au pregătit. Și au chemat numele lui Baal de dimineață până la amiază, zicând: Baale, auzi-ne! Dar nu s-a auzit nici glas, nici răspuns. Și
So
săreau
now
împrejurul.
27. Yes.
Yeah, 26.
That was 26. 27.
27.
La amiază, Ilie și-a bătut joc de ei și a zis: strigați tare, fiindcă este Dumnezeu, se gândește la ceva sau are treabă, sau este în călătorie, sau poate că doarme și se va trezi. Ei au strigat tare și, după obiceiul lor, și-au făcut tăieturi cu săbiile și cu sulițele până ce a curs sânge pe ei.
On 29, just before Elijah takes over, it says that all this happened in the afternoon.
Exactly.
During the time of the afternoon, we use the same term in Hebrew for the afternoon prayer, the mincha. So Elijah calls to all of the people and says, come over to me. And all this happens in the afternoon. So read from 29.
Când a trecut amiaza, au aiurat până în clipa când se aducea jertfa de seară. Dar nu s-a auzit nici glas, nici răspuns, nici semn de luare aminte. 30. Ilie a zis atunci întregului popor: apropiați-vă de mine. Tot poporul s-a apropiat de el. Și Ilie a dres altarul Domnului, care fusese sfărâmat. A luat 12 pietre după numărul semințiilor fiilor lui Iacov, căruia Domnul îi zisese: Israel îți va fi numele, și a zidit cu pietrele acelea un altar în numele Domnului. A făcut împrejurul altarului un șanț în care încăpeau 2 măsuri de sămânță. A așezat apoi lemnele, a tăiat juncul în bucăți și l-a pus pe lemne. Apoi a zis:
That's 34.
we have another proposition, another sentence in 33.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I went too fast. Okay.
Apoi a zis: umpleți 4 vedre cu apă și vărsați-le pe arderea de tot și pe lemne. Și au făcut așa. Now 34. Apoi a zis: mai faceți lucrul acesta odată. Și l-au făcut încă o dată. Și apoi a zis: mai faceți-l și a 3-a oară. Și l-au făcut și a 3-a oară. Apa curgea în jurul altarului și a umplut cu apă și șanțul. 36.
Yes. Now in the afternoon, yes.
We're now at the evening sacrifice.
Yes,
36.
36. Yeah.
În clipa când se aducea jertfa de seară, prorocul Ilie s-a apropiat și a zis: Doamne, Dumnezeul lui Avram, Isaac și Israel, fă să se știe astăzi că Tu ești Dumnezeu în Israel, că eu sunt slujitorul Tău și că toate aceste lucruri le-am făcut după porunca Ta. Ascultă-mă, Doamne, ascultă-mă pentru ca să cunoască poporul acesta că Tu, Doamne, ești adevăratul Dumnezeu și să le întorci astfel inima spre bine. Atunci a căzut foc de la Domnul și s-a mistuit arderea de tot, lemnele, pietrele și pământul și a subt și apa care era în șanț.
39.
39. Când a văzut tot poporul lucrul acesta, au căzut cu fața la pământ și au zis: Domnul este adevăratul Dumnezeu. Domnul este adevăratul Dumnezeu.
By the way, we say that at the end of the Yom Kippur Rugachuna. We say that verse. Okay, so the term mincha in Hebrew is a dublaton. It means both an offering, but it also means the afternoon. So all this happens, God answers him in the afternoon. And the Talmud says that the afternoon is the best time for a person to pray. Why is that? In the morning, it's easy to remember to pray. You just got up. So in the evening, you can remember because it became dark. You're going home. In the afternoon, you're busy. So it's the hardest time to have concentration to pray. It takes more of a skill. But it says about Elijah that God answered him in the afternoon. Isaac is the type of person also who he represents what's called the prayer in the afternoon. It actually says it was in the afternoon that he was in the field there, and they claim that he was praying in the field, even though it doesn't say that in the text. But Isaac was the type of person that after the story of the binding of Isaac, the Akedah, where Abraham brings him, in the end does not sacrifice him and brings a ram instead. If you remember the story in Genesis chapter 22, but Isaac, for the rest of his life, he becomes a very inner type of person, a very insular type of person. If you remember the Akedah story in chapter 22 in Genesis, at the beginning, Abraham says to the two boys that are accompanying him, I will go up with Isaac and we will bow down and come back. But at the end of the story of Genesis 22, the binding of Isaac, it says that only Abraham came back. You can check that. Isaac disappeared. Isaac couldn't go back home the same person. Remember, Abraham binded him on the altar, and Isaac figured that this was the end. And so he closes his eyes, he opens up his eyes, and all of a sudden, Abraham is taking a ram instead of him. The angel told Abraham not to touch the boy and not to hurt him. But Isaac didn't hear that prophecy. A prophecy is only heard by the prophet who receives the prophecy. So Isaac in his life is a very insular, very inner type of person. And he represents the afternoon prayer, which is the prayer which is the hardest to pray. And you have to be skilled in order to find the time away from your workday in order to be able to concentrate in the prayer that time. So this brings us back to the idea of the three types of prayer. The morning prayer, which represents Abraham, the optimism, the sun is shining, new possibilities. The evening, the night prayer, the evening prayer, which is Jacob, a prayer during the time of difficulties, and the afternoon prayer, which represents like an inner prayer, a person who wants to feel spirituality even during the mundane parts of life. I take you back now to what we were reading before, the Zohar. Zohar says that in the morning, a person has to unite with the right side, and in the afternoon with the left. What does this mean? In Kabbalistic language, sorry?
That means in the morning a person has to unite with Abraham?
In a sense, yes. Abraham represents the attribute of kindness. Like it says in the book of Micah, give kindness to Abraham and truth to Jacob, like that you have promised our forefathers in the time of old. So Abraham is called kindness. He does things. To be a kindness or acts of kindness are done by activist people. If you sit in your house and do nothing, you can't do even acts of kindness. So that's called the morning. So the morning prayer connects to the right side, and the right side is called kindness or love. Love is also giving. So the right hand side, like the right hand of the body, is called the hand of love and the hand of kindness. We give with the right hand. We receive with the left. And the left hand is called the hand of fear. You have love and fear. So connecting in the morning is called connecting with love. And it's easy to connect with love when life is going okay. The connection in the evening is called the connection of fear and reverence. It's called the connection of Isaac. As it says when Laban catches up with Jacob, it says that Laban took an oath not to hurt Jacob, and he took the oath in the name of the god of Nahor. And Nahor, of course, was the older son of Terah, who was actually a pagan. And it says that Jacob took an oath in the God of Isaac, but instead of the God of Isaac, it says the fear of Isaac. Pachad Yitzchak. So Isaac is called the afternoon prayer, which is called fear or reverence. And Abraham is called the morning prayer, which is called love. It's called love and fear, the right hand and the left hand. So this is an idea that you find in the Zohar, which this is a Kabbalistic idea. So the morning prayer is called prayer of love, Abraham, and the afternoon prayer is called the prayer of fear or reverence. The prayers and requests are needed daily for a person to unite with them. We need these prayers. We need the prayers and the requests. What's the difference between a prayer and a request? I said it last week. A request is when I need something. Prayer is when I need the connection.
Prayer is
A
love.
request means, God, I need some help. I need a new job. I can't stand my boss. Can you help me? Maybe you will, maybe you won't. Prayer means, God, I need you in my life. That's
Prayer
it. I need
is
you in my life.
spirituality.
Nothing specific. So that's the difference between prayer and the request. There are requests within prayer, but there's also prayer without requests. So prayer and requests are needed daily by people. Unite with them. Unite with what? It's called the love and fear, the right hand and the left hand. Very often in Zoharic literature, there's two relationships to God. There's a relationship of love, which is called Abraham, and the relationship of fear. And even these relationships have levels. There's the lowest level of fear. The lowest level of fear means I'm afraid that if I do the wrong thing, God will punish me. That's called the lowest level. It's like a child. A child doesn't know why to go to school. You say, you don't go to school, you're going to be punished. I'm going to put you in your room. Won't open the door up the door for 3 hours. So, oh, no, I'll go to school. That's called punishment. But then if the child likes learning, they say, you know what? I want to be there on time. We got a great teacher. So obviously it's better when the child goes to school because they like going to school. And there's actually more chance they're going to study something. If they go to school out of fear, they'll come to school, but then they'll fall asleep on the table. So obviously the goal is for them to go to school out of love. So when a person wants to do the right thing, if they do it out of love because they believe in doing the right thing, it's a much higher level than if a person does it out of fear, because if I do the wrong thing, I don't know, the police will arrest me. I'll go to the court, I'll be punished, or God will punish me, right? So, when a person has to decide whether they want to do the right or the wrong thing. So from the point of view of fear, there are at least three things to fear. Number one is your conscience, right? If I start shouting at somebody, if I shout at my cousin who lives right next door to me, I won't be able to talk to him after. I'll feel terrible. That's called the conscience. Now, if that doesn't bother me, then if I do something wrong, if I steal, I might get caught by the police, right? Now, if that doesn't bother me, but when they send me to jail, that might bother me. So there are certain things, but it's much better if the person wants to do the right thing, because all those three defense mechanisms could break down. So that's the first level of fear and love, where love is higher than fear. But there's another type of fear which is higher than love, and that's called reverence, which means I'm not afraid of God. I am in awe over God. I am totally blown away with the concept of God. It inspires me. That's reverence. That's not fear. Meaning the love brings you to a level of reverence. That's what Moses Chaim Luzzatto says. First, yes, when you were a child, you had fear. Then you started understanding what it's about, then it brings to love, which means you want to do the right thing. And once you get to that, then you're full of awe about the whole concept. In a relationship too, there's lower fear and higher fear. For instance, a man might say, you know what? I don't want to forget my wife's birthday or else she's going to shout at me. That's a lower fear. I don't want to be punished. Or she won't make me dinner for the next month. Right? That's called fear. Then there's love, which means I want to do the right thing because I love her and I want to do the right thing. That's the second level. But then there's another level of fear, which means I want to do the right thing because I'm afraid to lose her. I'm not afraid that she's going to get mad at me. I'm afraid to lose the love. That's a higher level of fear, right? So I'm just saying that, so in the same thing in relationship to God, there's the lower fear. I'm afraid of punishment. But you know what? If you're afraid of punishment, the fear of punishment is not the fear of God. It's the fear of punishment. Just like I'm afraid if a policeman will punish me, I'm afraid that God will punish me. The lowest level of fear is the fear of punishment. The next level is the fear that God will punish me. Then the next level is the love of God. Then the next level is reverence. If you follow what I'm saying. Because if I only fear punishment, God's not in the picture. These are things discussed in if you're familiar with the Hasidut Chabad.
Sir, in numbers, when people of Israel are with Abraham, and they don't know, they fear about people in Canaan, about the others.
Right. Of course, they're afraid of having wars in Canaan, and maybe they're strong, and they look like giants, and we look so small.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the spies who went out. Yes, and the people were afraid. Yeah. I thought you were going to talk about something else. In the book of Deuteronomy, Moses says to the people, what does God ask of you aside from fear of God? But even when he says that, there are levels of fear of God. There's the lower level where you're afraid because God is strong, whatever. And then there's the higher level, which is reverence. Or there's the higher level, I don't want to lose the connection with God. I'm afraid to lose that connection. That's a higher level of fear than the fear of punishment. The saintly ones are not afraid of punishment. They're afraid of losing the connection. It's a level to reach. Okay, let me just read this because our time is starting to dwindle. The prayers and requests are needed daily for a person to unite with them. Meaning to unite with this love and fear, these levels. We have learned that one who prays before their master should not hear their voice in prayer. For if they hear their voice, their prayer is not accepted. This is a very interesting statement by the Zohar. You know, in the main prayer of the three prayers a day that we have, it's called the silent meditation or the silent standing prayer, Amidah. And in that prayer, we pray silently. We don't raise our voices, like in a whisper. The Zohar says your voice should not be audible at all during that prayer, not even a whisper. Because if your voice is audible, the prayer is not accepted. Very interesting. According to Jewish law, based on the Talmud, if a person is saying that prayer, you can say in a whisper where you only hear, but not the person next to you. You can say, like that. So, but according to the Zohar, you're not supposed to say, you can move your lips, but you're not supposed to be able to hear anything. Like that, like when you're on mute. So, that's what the Zohar says. Why? What's the argument of the Zohar? What is the reason? Because prayer, the meaning of prayer is not the audible voice of a person. The audible voice of a person is not the real prayer. What is the real prayer? There is another voice which is dependent on your voice. The voice that one hears, meaning your voice, is the word kol, voice with a vav. But the voice that we don't hear, which is the inner voice, that's the word kol, voice without the vav. The Zohar claims when a person prays, the goal of their prayer is not, you have to move your lips. Mm-hmm. And you're supposed to produce some type of mimicking of a voice. But the goal of the prayer is for the inner voice of your soul to talk. What you are doing with your body is to create a chain reaction to get your inner soul to start to pray. So that the main voice, which ascends to the heavens, is not your voice, it's the voice of your soul praying. And what you are doing is just igniting the switch through your meditation and through your intent. That's called the inner voice. The word kol without the vav. That's this explanation. Yes. It's interesting.
Very interesting.
But it's interesting how they take it from the story of Joseph, and the whole discussion is how come in the Bible sometimes the word kol, which means voice, has the letter vav and sometimes it doesn't. And they're saying because there's the outer voice and the inner voice. When we pray, we use our outer voice, but the goal is to move the inner voice. And therefore, if you listen too much to your own prayer, you're going to think that that voice is the goal. That's not the goal. The goal is to move your whole inner soul so that your soul starts praying to God. And just like Jacob's ladder, the bottom of the ladder is here, but the top of the ladder is in the heavens. And we're shaking the ladder as we're praying. That's the idea. Okay, now we read a piece of the Zohar. You can see already the style, which is a very interesting style. There, obviously, when you read paragraphs from the Zohar, there's certain terminology you have to figure out, but it, as you see, it can be understood. Are there any questions at this point?
Yes, about the voice. So not the voice in the middle, the unwritten with vav. Very interesting.
Yeah. In other words, a person prays, and when you pray, in the morning prayers, the Jewish morning prayers, there are 4 parts. Part number 1 are blessings. Blessings, where they're called the morning blessings. And in addition to the morning blessings, you also have a description of the temple service. All that is part 1. First, the morning blessings when you wake up in the morning, and there's a description of the temple service, what was done in the morning. So all the things, the first part of the prayer is all actions. It's called, according to the Kabbalists, it's 4 worlds. The lowest world is called the world of action. That's our world. Because in our world, actions speak louder than words. So we're in the world of action. The second, I'm sorry?
I have a question about something you said at the beginning of the class, but I can ask later.
Okay, I'll just finish this and then now.
Okay.
The second level, in the second part of the prayer in the morning, we read from the Psalms of David. We read, I can tell you exactly which Psalms, but anyhow, we read from the Psalms of David. We read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 10 Psalms. Then we read a paragraph from the book of Nehemiah. Then we read the song on the sea, which we read the pericope of last Sabbath, when the Jews crossed through the Red Sea, the song that they sang when the Egyptians were drowned. And that's part 2. So it's all Psalms of David and song. So that's the next world, which is called the world of creativity. Song, emotions is part of human creativity, artistic creativity. And that's called the world of formation or creativity, in Hebrew, Yetzirah. Then the next part of the prayer is when we say what's called the Shema. The Shema is Deuteronomy chapter 6, where we talk about, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is God, the Lord is one." There's a paragraph there, then the second paragraph there from Deuteronomy chapter 11, and then a third paragraph from Numbers 16. All of these are called the 3 paragraphs of the Shema, and they're all a meditation on the unity of God. So it's like an intellectual part of the, or what you call meditative part of the prayer. And the final part of the prayer, which was what I call the silent standing prayer, which I mentioned before, silent meditation, which is done completely silently. It has 19 benedictions. And among the 19 benedictions, the middle 16 are all goals that we strive for. They also include requests for rain and requests for prosperity, but then also goals to bring the Jews back to Israel, to build Jerusalem, to bring the divine presence back to Jerusalem, to bring back justice and the judges and etc. So they also represent goals, and goals are something which you strive for. As Confucius says, a goal is something you never reach. It has to inspire you. Mm-hmm. The goal of justice. You never reach it 100% in this world.
Yes,
but if you strive for it, then you're on the right path. Right? The goal of goodness. If you want goodness, you'll bring it into the world. You might not achieve it 100%, but at least you have a chance. So actual goals are things that inspire you, not that you achieve. Because goals that you achieve are little goals. The everlasting goals are the ones that you can never actually achieve in this world, but they inspire us. Justice, unfortunately, even peace, yes. But the more you strive for it, the more there is the chance of having a peaceful world. Okay, so these are like levels of meditational levels within the prayer service. Okay, Katrina, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, when we talked earlier about the Kabbalah and the origin of the text, yes. You said that we had this difference on the text of Moses de Leon. We had this difference between the origin from Moses or the origin from Adam to Seth to Noah and so forth.
Yes, according to Moses de Leon, what was the origin of the Kabbalah? Was it from Noah and Adam, or was it from Moses and Sinai? Yes,
exactly. And you said it was said that Moses forgot part of the knowledge during the time.
Not Moses forgot. He says that after the time of the prophets, a lot of this knowledge was forgotten because of the exile.
Because of the exile.
Babylonian exile and the exile after the destruction of the Second Temple. So a lot of that's what he says, that things were forgotten, but there were always certain individuals who were familiar with these ideas.
Exactly, because somehow it could be understood that the text of the Kabbalah doesn't recognize the Torah, but has nothing to do with it.
No.
I don't even know exactly what you mean by that. What do you mean by that? I'm not sure I understand.
Vrei să spui că în Kabbalah nu acceptă Tora?
Nu spun
according to
asta.
Moses de Leon, the Kabbalah is the way to understand the Torah. So how could it not accept the Torah?
No, not to accept it. Only this was my confusion was about this certain people who were keeping only a part of the knowledge.
No, not. He claims that after the destruction of the Second Temple,
after
when the Jews go into the exile, because of the exile, the Kabbalah, which was never written down, most people were not aware of it, except for certain individuals who passed it from generation to generation. That is his argument. Now, everybody agrees that there was this secret knowledge, but the question that the historians ask is, what is the connection between the Kabbalah and the earlier evidence of some type of Jewish secret knowledge? That's the question, and that question is a difficult one. But according to Moses de Leon, his belief is that this is a direct link.
Okay, thank you. I got it now. Thank you so much.
Now, as you talked about Kabbalah, may I have another question, sir?
Yeah, go for it. Sure.
Thank you. So Kabbalah, it's only a secret, is only for some people?
Well, it depends. There were times when the study of Kabbalah was reserved for people who were over the age of 40. But in an article that Moshe Idel wrote, he shows that that was basically a reaction to probably Sabbatianism, Shabtai Tzvi, because people were afraid that it would lead them in the wrong direction. They took this idea of the age of 40 because in the 13th century, there were those who claimed that you shouldn't study philosophy before the age of 40. So the ones who were afraid of philosophy started becoming afraid of Kabbalah, and they also came up with this idea of the age of 40. But I always say that if it was unanimously agreed that Kabbalah cannot be studied before the age of 40, most of the scholars of Kabbalah wouldn't have been able to write their books. Because Isaac Luria, one of the greatest Kabbalists from the 16th century, died at the age of 38 or 36, I think even. Around 38. And Moses Chaim Luzzatto of 18th century Italy, also great Kabbalist, died at 40. And there are others too. So obviously they did not believe they had to wait till the age of 40 to do so. But in the rabbinic literature, in the Talmud, for instance, it says there's certain things that when you teach people, you have to make sure it's one-on-one and that the person is a reliable person, meaning they will understand what you're going to teach them. So you do have this concept of, only specific people. Anything else?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so we were talking about having our little exam on, what was it again? February?
9th.
February the
9th of February.
Okay, that doesn't
Friday,
give us
9th
much
of February.
time. So I need to prepare questions for you to be able to first to prepare. Is that enough time for you, by the way?
I don't know. That's a question.
We have 1 week.
But otherwise, on the 11th, we have to have all the grades.
Oh, you need the grades on the 11th. I got it.
Yes, it's the last day. It's the last day for grades, sir.
I understand. Okay, so we said February the 9th. So, okay, it'll be February the 9th. So February 9th, we said at 11 o'clock a.m.
Yeah.
And, right. Okay, so today is Thursday. I will try to prepare these questions for you sometime by Sunday, and then I'll just send it to you, okay?
Sunday,
Okay,
this Sunday, sir, on the 4th?